This episode of the Blank Podcast is sponsored by Chatty Hatter Media and Marketing.
Chatty Hatter is a bespoke PR marketing agency based in Kent and serving the UK, which delivers unique to you strategies with a fresh perspective.
Oh, I grew up in Kent. Lovely place. Many businesses and brand owners see social media and think marketing their product must be easy, with millions of potential customers at their fingertips.
But when it comes to the crunch, marketing and getting noticed is more complicated than ever before.
If you're looking for a company or product to get the attention it deserves, want your brand to be packaged up beautifully and for it to hit the right audiences and fast, Chatty Hatter has a whole team of press, PR and marketing professionals who are experts in their field.
With a powerful skill set between them, they are fully equipped to handle all aspects of clients' marketing and media needs. They never compromise on quality and have a firm grasp of what it takes to stand out in a competitive marketplace, and all at an affordable price.
With clients ranging from engineering to publishing and fashion to photography, Chatty Hatter delivers excellent marketing strategies with unrivaled results all under one roof.
So don't draw a blank. Contact Chatty Hatter for more information and advice on how they can help you. Chatty Hatter can be found at www.chattyhatter.com.
And the National Centre for Behaviour Change,
who have been helping to create positive, sustainable change since 2003.
NCBC supports all change, whether it be in addiction, managing anxiety, weight loss or workplace health, and has a world-class team of behavioural psychologists and change specialists at the ready.
Offering professional behaviour change training, supervision and one-to-one therapy, NCBC aims to help make our world a better, healthier and more connected place.
If you would like to explore making a change in your life or to find out more about NCBC's services, please visit their website ncbc-uk.com. Right, let's get on with the episode. Welcome to Blank, the podcast that delves into those frustrating moments with some well-known people. I'm Jim Daly, and of course I'm joined by Giles Paley-Phillips. How are you?
I'm all right, mate. How are you?
Good. Are you excited?
Very excited. So excited for this podcast.
It's happening.
It's a long time in the coming.
It is.
Is that the right word?
I don't know. Dan, that's the first Blank moment of the entire series.
I mean, it's been 10 years I've been wanting to do this.
Wow.
I know. And I've said to people about this, and they've said, I've never heard you talk about doing a podcast before. I was thinking, it's always been there.
Yeah.
10 years in the making.
Man, it better be a success.
Oh, God.
Well, anyway, shall we explain a bit about the pod? Because this pod's about blank moments.
Yeah.
And we've got some great names lined up. Today's guest, kicking off first ever season, is Jon Ronson.
The amazing Jon Ronson. And I have to admit, when we met Jon, I'm a super fan of Jon Ronson's, and I have to admit I was quite nervous meeting Jon.
Yeah,
because,
me too.
And actually, there were a few little blank moments.
There were a
in
few.
the podcast.
Exactly. I think we both have a blank moment in the first 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Of this pod.
And I thought, I hope this isn't a sign of things to come, and this is going to be a really terrible podcast because, I fluffed the name of Jon's brilliant book. So you've been publicly shamed.
Yeah, and I referenced the wrong project he'd worked
on.
So
apologies to Jon.
But this pod is all about blank moments, and so we are intentionally leaving those things in.
We are. We talked about this quite early on, that we would just want to leave those moments in because it just seems more natural.
Yeah, exactly.
And it can't have a blank podcast and not allow blank moments in the podcast. So.
Exactly. And we also, we have our own blank moments outside of the pod. For example, you're trying to finish a book at the moment.
Yeah, I've been trying to write, but I mean, I've stopped writing really because I've been struggling with writing, and so that's certainly been a blank moment for me. And obviously, you with your stand up,
I want to get back into doing stand up, but almost got the fear a little bit of going back in and trying new material and hoping it goes well. So we're kind of hoping from these podcasts over the next few weeks to maybe sort of learn to deal with our own blank moments. Hopefully,
well, let's hope. There's hope.
If not,
hope is a great thing, isn't it? Isn't it great? Hope is a wonderful thing.
Hope is a wonderful thing.
I think certainly the podcasts we've done so far, I think there's every reason why we can be filled with hope, and
Exactly.
also some great advice.
Exactly, and let's kick off then with some great advice from Mr. Jon Ronson on the very first Blank podcast.
Well, the first thing I wanted to say was that I was quite late to the Jon Ronson party, I'm afraid.
Certainly the words Jon Ronson party is
I think
incongruous, given the fact that I never go to
any parties. Yeah, I did wonder that when I was thinking of that. But yeah, I mean, I was always aware of your work, but I think I was doing a book event in Stratford, and it was a long train journey, and I was in like the train station bookshop, and How to Be Publicly Shamed.
So you've been publicly shamed.
So you've been publicly shamed. We'll have to
How
cut
to be
that.
publicly shamed?
Yeah,
Sounds like a guide on how to be publicly
yeah.
shamed.
Sorry. So you've been publicly shamed. Do beg my pardon. Was there, and I mean, I've always been interested in social media. Anyway, I've done some freelance work in the past, and so I sort of picked that up, and I was really intrigued by it. And then I remember reading it on the train all the way there, and I remember being really pleased the next day when I had a gap between events, so I could just go in a cafe and carry on reading it, because I was so enthralled by it.
Yeah.
But it did give me a mild form of panic. I was feeling very anxious.
Well, that was deliberate. I mean, I deliberately wanted to make people feel anxious. The image, as I was writing that book, the image that kept coming into my mind was the woman lost in the forest in the Blair Witch Project.
Oh, yeah, totally.
Yeah. And I thought, I want people to feel like that woman.
I definitely felt like her, yeah. And, I think I remember thinking at the time, this feels like a book that was really hard to write, and I wondered if that was a fair assessment.
It was a very hard book to write for many reasons. The first reason is that nobody wanted to be in it. Like no one wanted to talk. Everybody, because I was basically getting people to talk about the worst moments of their lives. I mean, you make some kind of mistake, Twitter destroys you, so you feel like humiliated. Part of you feels ashamed and humiliated. Part of you feels like the victim of identity theft. Because you're being judged for some tiny little slither of your life by people who don't know anything about you. I'm not talking about public figures. I'm talking about some private individual. So you got all of these complicated and very negative feelings. That sense of once you've been, because basically what is the public shaming? But it's a excommunication from the community.
Yeah,
you're being told you're not good enough.
Yeah.
So you're feeling all of those things, and you're believing it, and you're reading every negative tweet about you, and you're contemplating suicide or self-harm. You fall into a depression, and then Jon fucking Ronson comes along, wants you to relive the whole thing.
The whole sorry mess up again.
Just after you got over it.
Yeah. Well, some of the people I was contacting were right in the middle of it. And then others, it had just passed, and they were just beginning to get on with their lives. Yeah. So that was the first problem. Nobody wanted to be there.
Yeah.
The second problem is that there was no clear narrative structure. And I really believe in narrative arcs in non-fiction. Yeah. I'm not a fan of the kind of non-fiction where all the sort of narrative standards slip, where a book starts with, I'm going to tell you why alternative medicine is bad. And then the whole book is why alternative medicine is bad. It's like why can't a non-fiction book have the same ambition as a novel? Yeah. So those were two of the reasons. The third reason was it was really anxiety-inducing writing that book. I felt like I was seeing a side of humanity that I didn't actually think existed. A side, sort of. It's more than cruelty. Lots of social scientists have said say that violence is worse when it's being committed for moral purposes. Yeah. So if you feel like you're killing somebody for morality, that you've got morality on your side, the violence is often worse. And so that's what happens during a lot of social media shamings. They're more brutal because the people doing it are doing it in the cause of morality.
They think they're doing it for the right reasons.
Yeah.
For the right thing.
And sometimes, obviously not all social media shamings are the same. Sometimes, like somebody has done something really bad and they need to be made advantage of. But quite often it's just some stupid nothing thing that people are turning into something huge.
Yeah.
So for all of those reasons, that was a long answer. But for all of those reasons,
that's perfect.
Oh yeah, so basically it would made me anxious. Like I remember thinking at the time, like years ago, I did the story about a family of white separatists some of whom were shot by the FBI.
Yes, yeah.
And it was
That's in them, isn't it?
Yes, in them. This family called the Weaver family. Yeah. And it's a terrible story with people dying. But when I did that story, there was a part of me that was always kind of distant to it, which is basically my family is almost definitely never going to be shot by the FBI. So I feel really sorry for these people, notwithstanding the fact that they were white separatists. But I felt really sorry for the injustice that was done to them. But it never seeped its way into my bones, because I just thought, well, you went to Aryan Nations for a start. It's like you were playing with fire here. Whereas on the people being destroyed and the people doing the destroying on social media are us.
Yeah.
So that was the other reason why it was so hard for me to write, because I was thinking, oh my God, I could be either one of these people. I could be Justine Sacco, or I could be the people tearing Justine Sacco apart. And my God, it's like I've opened a door to a side of humanity that I actually had persuaded myself didn't exist, which was the everyday cruelty of regular nice people.
Well, and I felt like that reading it as well, like kind of looking over my shoulder a bit, and then I'm going to check all my tweets now.
Well, we had that today, didn't we?
Yeah,
because there's a thing with Kirsty Allsop has quit Twitter.
Oh,
and
so
you were going through your tweets today,
because I've sometimes been like,
mean to Kirsty Allsop.
I have been mean to Kirsty Allsop. Justifiably, I feel.
because I live in New York, a lot of my memories of British culture have sort of diminishing a bit. So you're going to have to tell me why you're mean to Kirsty Allsop and what she's done to deserve it.
Well, I think initially because I didn't really like the sort of vacuous location program, but more recently it's been her kind of travails into sort of politics and
where's she coming from
the right.
Okay,
some of her parenting is mainly what people have been in uproar about,
and that's what this is recently.
And so she came out on television yesterday, I think it was, saying that she'd got so frustrated with her children breaking the rules on their use of the iPad when playing games like Fortnite, that in a fit of rage she'd smashed the iPads across the chair.
Over her daughter's
Not quite, but on the chair that the daughter was sitting, or the son was sitting next to. So just smashed them and said, serves you right, kind of thing, and look what you've done.
Yeah. No more iPads.
Look what you've made me do.
Wow.
And of course there's been a bit of a pile-on.
Yeah.
And I guess, fair play to owning up to doing to performing such an act of violence in front of your children, but
But we were on a BBC article that had tweets about it, and you were looking through it being like, I really hope one of my tweets doesn't end up on this article.
Because that's happened to me before when I've not in a pile-on so much, but like with sometimes it's been like a positive thing, maybe like someone,
like you've said something funny about the Olympics,
or I've been really kind about someone who's passed away, and you think, oh, that's nice, they've considered me famous enough. I've got enough followers to be worthy enough to be on the BBC News. But I was slightly thinking, oh no, because I didn't send my tweet wasn't that unkind. I just sort of said, wouldn't it be nice if possibly given the iPads to charity, or or
just confiscated them
or turn the Wi-Fi off. Maybe not smashing them against a chair was probably the best kind of. But anyway, so she's fled Twitter after this furore
today.
Today,
right? Okay.
Yeah. So I guess maybe not enough people are reading your book.
Yeah, it's funny when I should say I opted out. Like with every book I've written, I've always thought, okay, I've spent 3 years, 4 years, whatever, writing this book. I'll do as much promotion for this book as people want, because I want to give it as much of a chance as possible. But what normally happens is that promotion has a inherently finite period. So with the Psychopath Test, I was probably promoting that book for, 6 months, maybe 8 months, something like that. And then the interview requests stopped, and that was fine. So you've been publicly shamed. The interview requests never stopped. And I became, as you probably know from following me on Twitter, I became Mr. Shame. Yeah. My friend John Safran calls me a shaming imam. Anytime anyone gets shamed.
You're the go-to shame man.
I'm the go-to guy. And so it was getting ridiculous. It was getting, A, it was taking up all my time. Yeah. B, it was becoming unseemly. Mainly because, like, for a whole generation of people, I was just like Mr. Shame. Like, they didn't know anything else about me except for I was the twat who pops up every time someone's
I'm feeling bad for bringing it up now.
So I opted out. So I think I deliberately, I think I probably, in doing that, cut the shelf life of the book down a little bit, actually. Because I turned down shame interviews, I don't know, 5 a week, probably, maybe more. So I think the book would probably be out there a little bit more if I hadn't stopped doing that. But I just felt there's a real danger for a writer to get trapped inside a subject matter.
But do you not think that book will always be relevant?
Yes. I think it was... I think me and Monica Lewinsky in particular started grappling with this before anyone else did. So I think the two of us, and her TED Talk and my book came out practically the same time, a couple of weeks apart. And I think we sort of started the argument with the ones who started getting people thinking about social media shaming. Yeah. So I think that book will always have its sort of place in the culture for being the first book to look at the malevolent power of social media. But I'm sure other books will come along that will sort of take over.
Yeah. I wonder if Melania might write one, do you think?
I wonder. I wonder what to think about Melania. My instinct, actually, is that Melania... I could be wrong. I mean, this is just a guess. My instinct is that Melania is probably sincere with this stuff. I think she's probably... wishes to fuck she wasn't married to Donald Trump and wishes she wasn't in the White House. Yeah. And this is her sincere way, but who knows? Yeah. But that's my guess anyway.
But I guess maybe has to put the blinds up when coming to her own husband's tweets.
But you seem to have a real empathy for people. And is that a way you're able to connect to these people that don't want to be interviewed for the shaming book, or even someone like Melania? You seem to have a quite sort of... empathy is your first way in. Is that fair?
Yeah, I'd say so. I always, and once in a while, I find that the empathy was misplaced, and that the person, there are people out there with sketchy character traits who, as much as you try to humanize them, you just can't do it. Yeah. So that does happen from time to time with me. But it's definitely always good to go in with a sort of open mind and open heart and from a place of empathy, because most times going in with that approach, it does reap its rewards. Plus, it's just the way that I naturally am anyway. As more now than before. I think when I was younger, I was more ambitious and more into what can this story do for me in my career. But that all changed, I'd say, 15 years ago maybe, where I suddenly realised I don't really have anything left to prove. Like, I'm doing okay. Yeah. I'm getting older, and do I really want to? Do I really? What do you want to do in your life, sort of in terms of ethics and morality? So I just, and as you get older, you accumulate the flotsam and jetsam of, or the mistakes you've made, and the baggage, and the mental health issues, and all those things. And so when you realise that, oh my God, I'm just a bag of, mental health issues and all of that stuff, then how can you not approach another person with empathy?
Because they're probably going to be very similar. They're going to have their own flotsam and jetsam and mental health issues and stuff.
Exactly. So I think it's really important to approach people with empathy for all of those reasons. As I say, once in a while, somebody's mental health condition has made them cold and manipulative and untrustworthy, and you do find people like that, and they do exist. And so then you can't be like a dupe. You have to. So I think when you're doing a story, there has to be both empathy and curiosity, but also truth. Like, you can't be afraid to tell the truth.
Yeah. Be that positive or negative.
Yeah. It is what it is. You know.
Yeah. And are you a sort of believer in people? Because that's the impression I'm getting. And I think, Charles, you and I quite see the good in people. I certainly, that's how I feel.
So, apart from Kirsty, also.
Is that sort of person you are as well, John?
Even Kirsty, sorry.
Right. Yes. Yeah. Certainly in terms of storytelling. I mean, on a human level, I'm quite introverted, so I don't go to parties. I tend to turn down most social invitations, and I tend to. So on a human level, I tend to stay home a lot.
Yeah.
And just be by myself. When my wife's out. But on a work level, on a storytelling level, very much.
Yeah.
It's all about people, shared humanity, kindness, curiosity, and so on.
Because that's how, like, we as humans are gonna get progress, isn't it? By getting on. I get really frustrated when people don't kind of see it that way.
I think so. It kills me that being a moderate, being a sort of centrist. I mean, I know those terms have various political connotations, but when I think of those terms, I just think of listening to people, talking to people, trying to come up with some kind of consensus. But of course, what's happening now in both this country and America is the pendulum is swinging crazily back and forward, and the people in the middle are being seen. And I'm not saying in the middle in terms of like I see a little bit of Trump that I like. Because I don't see. I don't,
just to make that clear.
I was going to ask you what little bit can you see?
But what I mean is, it's funny actually. What popped into my head when I went quiet just then was I just gave a college talk up in Michigan, in Horton, Michigan last week. And I did 2 talks, one in the morning, one in the afternoon. And in the morning, I made an anti-Trump comment on the stage. And this guy came up to me, and it turns out that this college in Michigan, it's a technical college, and there's quite a lot of Trump supporters in the audience. So one of them came up to me and said, I heard your comment this morning. So are you trying to tell me that all of Trump's voters are racist? And I was like, no. That was like nothing to do with what I'd said on the stage. And I don't think all of Trump's voters are racist. I do think a good deal of the ones who aren't racist did willingly blind themselves to the shit that Trump has said from day one.
Yeah.
But being up in that college in Michigan did make me think, these people aren't monsters.
Of course not, yeah.
A lot of them voted for Trump for economic reasons and not for social political reasons. So refusing to listen to them and mocking people, which is what the left does all the time, mocking people who even wants to interview them, it just drives me nuts.
Yeah, I mean, it is volatile on both sides, really, isn't it, at the moment?
And
again, we going back to sort of Twitter and social media. You see it so much on there, and it's so laid bare, isn't it?
Yeah, that kid who comes up to me, in Michigan, saying he came up with the most defensive thing he could possibly have said, which bore no relation to whatever it was about Trump had said on stage.
But that's kind of a default position, I think, when people feel offended or that you're attacking them, is that they go to the most extreme defense or whatever possible thing, when actually nothing's black and white. There are so many more nuances in everything, in the political spectrum, in gender. There's so many more nuances, but we find it as humans difficult to maybe convey that. So we have to go to the
And
extremes.
maybe we're choosing a side. We want to choose a side. To be honest.
Yeah.
And I understand. I mean, particularly with both Trump and Brexit, there's a real imperative to choose a side, and I do understand that. But both people take it. I mean, it happened to be last week. It happened to be last week, and I decided to do something about it. I had a guy, a journalist with 10,000 Twitter followers, making some joke, the context of which, and this is entirely because I wrote about Justine Sacco in my public shaming book. It's probably too long a story. Justine Sacco was a kind of liberal who made a liberal joke mocking privilege, which came over like a grotesque privilege joke of, sort of holding her own privilege. So she wasn't entirely innocent, although I would say that it didn't take me very long to work out what her joke meant.
Yeah.
So, the joke was going to Africa, hope I don't get AIDS. Just kidding, I'm white. Yeah. What she was trying to do, and it took me 5 seconds to work this out. It wasn't that, you don't have to be Inspector Clouseau, was make fun of her own
it was
bubble
satire,
of...
I guess.
Yeah, she was
Not very
satirising
good,
her own bubble of privilege.
Yeah.
Wasn't very good, but it's not anything that South Park and Randy Newman
absolutely
don't
not.
do.
Yeah.
So anyway, a few people decided that she's a racist and I must be a racist for writing nicely about her. So last week, some guy with 10,000 Twitter followers tweets some joke, the context of which was I was a Nazi sympathizer. So I just saw, so I woke up and I just thought, this crosses a line. So I went for it, and I tweeted him, and I said, look, we can DM if you like. I'll follow you, so you can DM me if you like. And he blocked me for saying that.
Oh.
Wow.
And so instead of having a conversation with him, he blocked me. Yeah. Wow. So then I wrote to his, and this is not something I do normally, I need to tell you, but I wrote to his editor and said, it's not cool to call a liberal Jewish journalist a Nazi sympathizer. I must admit, I added the Jewish bit because I could tell that he was a big aficionado of left-wing identity politics. And I thought, if I point out that
Really
I'm Jewish, that's going to really make him feel bad about what he did. So anyway, he then publicly apologized to me. So then I said, look, you don't have to publicly apologize to me. Please delete this tweet. So he did, and now it's all over. But I'm glad I did it.
Yeah.
But it would have been simple as him deleting the tweet early on.
Yeah.
Would have just eradicated all that.
I didn't even want an apology. What I wanted was for me and him to have a little conversation in direct messaging where I could say to him, look, Justine Sacco is not a racist. I'm not a racist for supporting her. And it's not cool for you to, be this hyperbolic about me because our reputations really matter. And you've got 10,000 Twitter followers. If one of those Twitter followers has 100,000 followers or 1 million followers and decides to retweet it, suddenly I'm a Nazi sympathizer all over Twitter.
Justine Sacco had 150 followers.
170 followers. And her tweet was retweeted 1,220,000 times.
That is incredible.
Yeah.
Insane.
So that's what I wanted to say to him. And he could have avoided all of that, all the public apology and everything by just having a conversation with me. Yeah. But as you said, people don't want to have conversations anymore.
No.
They don't. No. But speaking of conversations, what leads to you for ideas? Because it seems from the shaming book, it was a glance, wasn't it? It was a glance in a hotel bar.
Well, actually, no, that was my butterfly effect.
Oh, that was the butterfly effect. Yes, that's right.
Podcast.
Yeah.
Which one?
Yes. It's mystery is the thing that I'm always looking for. It's wanting to solve some kind of mystery. And then you have the instinct. So a mystery is there. I want to try and solve it. I don't know what's going to happen, but my suspicion is whatever happens will be interesting. And hopefully whatever happens will be both funny and exciting, but also will shed light on the way the world works. And you don't know all of those things when you start on a story. But so I suppose I've got I've sort of earned a little bit of instinct that, okay, if I do that story, those things I know other things that I need to make a good story may well happen.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm looking for. But I wouldn't say it's conscious. It's you tend to stumble on things.
But you are taking a leap of faith then, aren't you? With
Every
each thing
time.
you do.
And it's not just a leap of faith, it's a leap of money, because I'm paying.
Yeah.
You know, there's been many times I've flown to, Georgia or wherever, and spent, $5,000, just being there for a week trying to get a story off the ground, and it hasn't happened. But you just have to deal with the fact that that's just a part of it.
But again, we talk about the creative process on this podcast a lot, and that is difficult, I guess, when you are working on something and your heart's in something, and it doesn't happen. And how do you sort of give up on that?
Before I answer that question, I'm being perpetually tweeted. I just want to see if it's...
No, you're fine. It's not the journalist, is it?
It's all fine. Yeah, no, it's fine. Well, there's been a couple of times in my life where I've gone down a wrong path, and it's depressing. The time that really leaps out is I wrote a story probably, what year are we now, 2018, probably about 12 years ago. I wrote a story for The Guardian called Who Killed Richard Cullen, and it was a story about a guy who commits suicide because he's out of his depth in credit cards. And this is before the crash of 2008. This must have been about 2006 maybe. And I decided to do a story to try and work out why that happened. Did he have secret vices? Or it turns out he doesn't have secret vices. All he really did was subscribe to like gardening magazines and stuff. He was the most ordinary guy in the world. But he got slightly out of his depth with one card, so he got another card to pay off the debt on that one, and then he got ensnared in all of these tricks that the credit card companies pull on people to keep you in servitude to them. So I wrote a piece about that, where I discovered these incredible secrets that credit card companies, a lot of stuff that relates very strongly to what's happening with Cambridge Analytica today. And so it's all that kind of stuff. It's basically an early incarnation of Cambridge Analytica.
Okay, so data harvesting.
Yeah, a lot of data harvesting, list broking. I mean, it was stunning stuff. Anyway, my American publisher said, you need to write a whole book about the credit cards. Write Men Who Stare at Goats about the credit card industry. So I spent like about, I'd say 6 months trying to do it. And I just couldn't do it, mainly because I wasn't mature enough back then. I'd meet these list brokers and these data people, and they were boring. They were really boring, and their lives were boring. They just went into the office every day and did their thing. And, it was mainly bureaucracy. And I just couldn't find a way to make it light up on the page. And I after 6 months, I quit and didn't do it. And if I'd carried on and the book had come out, it probably would have come out just when the crash happened. And I'd have been,
laughing.
Yeah, I'd have been laughing. And but it didn't work out like that for that reason. If I did it now, I would probably find a way to do it. But back then, I still needed my characters to be colourful and a bit eccentric. I sort of needed those ingredients to make the story work. That's why it didn't work.
Yeah, so this podcast is about blank moments, and what you've described there
moments.
obviously is a blank moment.
Yeah.
And there must have been many others, I'm sure, in your career. How do you sort of deal with them? Do you have is it case by case, or do you have a certain way of trying to work through them, and actually maybe giving up in a way, or deciding not to follow an idea is potentially braver maybe than carrying it on sometimes?
Yeah, well, that was, and by the way, I would say that book didn't entirely die, because some of the ideas I took from that research and some of the thoughts that I had turned into the Psychopath Test, which came out in 2011. So I do sort of see the Psychopath Test as in its weird way being that book that I abandoned. Although the two books, it would have been nothing like the Psychopath Test. But well, one trick I have is I always work on 2 or 3 different projects at once.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, always. And always have. And I wake up in the morning And as I walk from the bedroom to my little office down the corridor, I can think to myself, if I'm working on 2 projects simultaneously, I can think to myself, which do I fancy working on today? Which do I have more passion for today? So that really helps.
Wow.
Because if you hit a wall with something, quite often it's just time.
Yeah.
Like if you hit a wall with something, go back to it a couple of days later and you can work out how to fix it.
Yeah.
So if you're working on 2 or 3 projects at once, you hit a wall with something, instead of just sitting there blankly for a few days, or you've hit a wall and now you're just staring at the wall, move on to another project and then go back to it.
That's fascinating though, because I find my main problem is working on too many things, and I find it hard to concentrate on one thing, and any little lapse I go to something else. But for you, it encourages you, I guess.
Oh, absolutely. I love it. Particularly if they're not even in the same genre. So at the moment, right now, I'm working on an audio series, and it's really an Audible original. Audible in America aren't really doing podcasts anymore. They're doing Audible originals. So I'm working on one of those, and I'm writing a screenplay. And so they're so different from each other. That really helps as well. I can think very clearly, like, do I want to be writing a screenplay today, or do I want to be sending my producer edit notes of the interview? That's a very clear distinction. Yeah.
That's
and do you find that easy to flip from, because obviously they're very different?
Very easy. I've got about 4 hours in the morning where I'm really clear-headed and I work at my absolute best. So what I tend to do is do the hardest stuff during those 4 hours. So writing a screenplay is harder than sending my producer edit notes, because sending edit notes is listening to an interview and basically doing the time codes of the best bits. I mean, that's pretty fucking easy. So as long as you've got the brain where you can identify what the best bits are, that's easy. So what I tend to do most days is the first couple of hours of the day is something hard, something that's going to make your brain hurt. And then when your brain starts to hurt, I just switch to the easier thing, like the edit notes.
And are you quite kind of hard on yourself then? Because you'll have some days where you get up in the morning and even in those 4 hours, it might not be happening, or it might be more of a slog. Do you force yourself through it?
Well, fortunately, if you're working on a bunch of different things at once, what often happens is the process, because different parts of the process are harder and easier than others. So, for instance, with a piece of writing, if I've been working on it for a few months and all that's left now is going back to it and taking out the superfluous words and just shining it up a little bit and holding it down a little bit, that's really easy and fun. So if I wake up in the morning and my brain's just not in it and so on, which doesn't happen very often, I have to say, because I'm so tied in with my work. I mean, most of my life is about working. I'll just go to one of the easier things, like a piece of work that's almost finished, and all I have to do is take out a couple of words. So I do work pretty much 7 days a week, I'd say. I took 3 days off about a month ago. We went to the Catskills in upstate New York for a little holiday. And that's literally the only days off I've had all year.
Wow.
But that's kind of stupid, really.
Are you good with days off?
I was in the Catskills. I loved it. Because
we were talking to a screenwriter in another pod, and he was saying that he will sit down sometimes to have some time with his daughter, and they'll watch a movie or something together. And he said he's looking at the screen, but he's not watching the film because he's just got stuff on his brain all the time. And that sort of not being able to switch off from the moment.
But there's something good about that. I mean, a lot of creative people will identify with this. Like, if you're right in the middle of a story, everything reminds you of the story. You walk past the bank and there's an ad in the window of the bank that gives you a new insight into your story. And that's a great feeling, because that's you sort of know that you're so deep into something. You're thinking about this harder than anyone is. So actually, I think that I see that as like a good. I mean, it's bad parenting, but it's good work.
Well, that's what I think we felt guilty because I do that as well. I think it's the guilt kind of weighing over us a little bit, perhaps.
That's true, and they can tell. Well, my son can certainly tell. The other day I was with my son and he was playing me something, and I got a text, and I looked down at the text, and it was like something urgent, work-wise. And I thought, but you know what? I'm not gonna just get up and leave. So I thought, but it was, and I'm sure he could tell. Like,
Yeah.
I'm sure he could tell that I was half of me had vanished into that text.
Yeah.
But it's hard these days when emails are in your hand
Yeah.
and text messages
Yeah,
there.
that's
It's
it.
very hard to switch off from that because it's right in your face every second of the day.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's not as
Being up in-
20 years ago that wouldn't have happened.
Yeah. Being up in the Catskills, though, I had none of those thoughts.
It's like an advert for
You
the
need to go-
Catskills.
Yeah, they need
Yeah.
to go up there more often, maybe.
Well,
Yeah.
we just bought a little house.
Oh, well then that's
Not actually in the mountains because that's a bit too isolating, but
Mm.
in a little village just the other side of the Hudson River from the
Oh,
Catskills. So
amazing.
I do intend to actually calm things down a little bit in
Yeah.
my life. And by the way, my son's 20 now, and so he doesn't, we
Yeah.
don't do those things
Sure.
anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to ask you about the butterfly effect. 'Cause
Sure.
obviously that's your most recent kind of work. How did that come about to start with?
So after my public shaming book came out, it was quite bruising. Not that, like, I don't want to over dramatize it, because I would say that 90% of everything that happened when that book came out was really positive.
Yeah.
Like, most people love it. It was just a very small number of very vociferous social justice people who had decided without reading the book that my book must be an attack on social justice. And I know that for sure, because like no one who reads the book would have those feelings. It's a thoughtful, I'm not a polemicist. I'm not Jordan Peterson. I'm a thoughtful, humanistic, moderate. Like, God, I sound like I wouldn't want to hang out with me. So anyway, that was it.
Yeah.
So but I was sort of bruised by the noise. It was a very noisy book when it came out. It was like throwing a hand grenade into the world. And I didn't enjoy the noise, including the positive noise. I just didn't enjoy any of the noise. So I wanted to do something that was easy and fun. And I happened to remember this thing that happened when I was at this hotel in Los Angeles. So I was meeting a porn star called Princess Donna. This is from my public shaming book. She has a very small cameo part in the book. So I'm at the Chateau Marmont. I don't stay there anymore. It's too hipster doofusy. But I was staying there that night. So the guy phones up and says, your guest is waiting for you downstairs. So I went downstairs. And everybody in the hotel reception was dressed exactly like I'm dressed now, which is in great muted greys and hoodies, like the sort of, my hoodie. It's like the kind of burqa of the intellectual sort of nebbishy Jewish writer, because you just don't want to be you want to be hidden. So everybody was in the lobby looked muted and hidden, except for Princess Donna, who looked like this kind of great mad peacock in this very bright dress and very high heels, and she just looked like she lived a life. That what's that lyrics in that song about your face is a map of the world? Her that's what her face looked like. And so I walked towards her thinking, God, I'm so looking forward to talking to this woman, because she'll have, she's lived some life. And I looked over at the hotel receptionist, and he was looking at her with a look. She was obviously some kind of sex worker. I mean, whether he recognised her as a porn star or not, I don't know. But he was looking at her with a look of total contempt. Like, what are you doing in my hallowed hotel reception? And by the way, this is the Chateau Marmont, which has got a reputation for being a kind of loose, hedonistic. So John Belushi died of a drug overdose. But still, that was the look that he had on his face, and that look just stayed with me, because kind of cheekily in a way, because people. What I'm trying to say is that I'm really interested in stigmatized and demonized people who are sort of unpopular, stigmatized and demonized people. So like Justine Sacco from my public shaming book is a classic example of that. That's a person who was wronged, but she's not she wouldn't win a popularity contest of wronged people.
Couldn't be near the top.
Yeah, and but I think, as I say in Say You've Been Publicly Shamed, a wronged person is a wronged person even when they're an unfashionable wronged person.
Yeah.
So, and I felt that way a little bit about porn people.
Yeah.
I thought it's kind of the same thing. It's like, I bet that hotel receptionist sees himself as a very woke person, yet he was still looking at Princess Donna with disgust. And I just thought that was so interesting, So that was my starting point.
And that one look
Yeah,
leads
just
you
that
down
look.
a rabbit hole.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's good to, try and keep your eyes open for those moments.
Yes.
They don't happen that often in your life,
But clearly you see them more than other people because this is why you do what you do.
Yeah, although I'd be lying if I said I was a kind of savant at those, at identifying those moments, because I'm sure I miss a bunch of them.
Yeah.
But luckily, once in a while, there was that moment. I remember it's a bit like when I saw The Sixth Sense. Is that the name of that movie?
Yeah.
And in the opening credits, I'm sitting in the cinema and I'm thinking, what do I know about this film? I know there's a twist, and I know that Bruce Willis sees dead people. Oh, I bet the twist is that Bruce Willis is dead. and once in a while, that happens. So there was a moment like
ruins the movie for you.
Yeah, there was a moment in about 2000.
Did you turn to the person next to you and say that?
No,
Proclaim that.
but the whole movie, I was like, oh, for fuck's sake, he's obviously dead. So,
Do you know that in places like China and stuff where they don't speak English and American movie titles get translated for their country, and then you translate it back and it means something different.
Yeah.
Well, in China, The Sixth Sense is translated as "He's a Ghost."
Oh, really?
The worst title for that movie. Give the plot away, why don't you? You just wouldn't bother seeing it.
That's really funny.
Yeah.
So there was a moment in about 2009, which is similar to that, where I thought many leading sort of Harvard psychologists and psychiatrists all believe that psychopaths rule the world, that you're much more likely to have a psychopath at the top of the tree than a bottom. And I thought, why don't I learn how to spot psychopaths and then journey into the corridors of power to see if I can spot any? And that was one of those 6 months moments for me. It's like, whatever happens is going to be funny.
And you got quite far.
Yeah, absolutely. So and another one of those moments was right back at the beginning of my career when my friend Fenton Bailey, who's a documentary producer, he makes RuPaul's Drag Race.
Oh, I love that show.
Yeah. And Fenton said to me, you should do something on conspiracy theories. And Fenton was thinking, like, boring, like, who killed JFK type stuff. Yeah. And I remember saying to him, we were standing on a roof in Brixton, I remember saying to him, well, there's one conspiracy theory that's really interesting me, which is all these disparate groups all believe that there's a shadowy cabal secretly ruling the world from inside a secret room.
Yeah.
Maybe I should hook up with them and we'll try and get into the secret room. And Fenton was like, yeah, I suppose you could do that. But that was another one of those moments.
And that was the Bilderberg.
Yeah, and so that became my book then.
Yeah.
The Psychopath thing became my book, The Psychopath Test. So once in a while you have these little moments where you think, shit, they are kind of like eureka moments. But I don't have that many of them.
But you must know at that moment when it happens, like, here we go. This is the moment.
It fulfills all those ingredients that I mentioned at the beginning of this interview. It's, you realise in a flash, it's like everything that I want in a story: mystery, comedy, adventure, big emotions, and some insight. And maybe all of those things will give you some insight into the way the world works. You know, what all those things have in common is they all contain that, I think.
Yeah.
And I think the look in the hotel contains that, because then that gave me permission to go into the valley, the San Fernando Valley, and hang around, on porn sets with porn people.
Yeah, I was going to ask you how you went from there to the free porn.
Well, what?
And Fabian.
Oh, I'll tell you what it was. It was meeting this woman called Stoya. There's a porn star called Stoya who's insanely beautiful. She's like, the Village Voice put her on the front cover. and said the cover was the most beautiful woman in New York as a porn star. And I remember her telling me that being on the Village Voice cover has done her so much good because it's destigmatizes her.
Sure,
Totally, yeah.
Yeah, so banks are more likely to give her checking accounts because she's been on the cover of the Village Voice.
Yeah.
So it was Stoya. I met Stoya. No, what happened was I started thinking, so I don't know anything about porn people at all. I don't know anything about their lives.
Yeah.
What are their lives like? So I started reading blogs, and I found a blog written by Stoya about where she was being mean about Fabian. She was saying there's this guy called Fabian who's ruining all of our lives, and he runs this site called Pornhub, and basically it's a depository of pirated content, and Fabian's getting incredibly rich and we're all losing all of our money and there's nothing we can do about it. So then I went to visit Stoya in where she lives in New York. And most porn people live in either Nevada or California, but she lives in New York. And so we talked about it, and yeah, that's how I came to Fabian. And then that became really interesting because Fabian became a kind of metaphor for all tech, like it's Uber, the Pornhub stories, the Uber stories. And we utilize those things. So we're all part of the problem. That goes back to
the shaming book. We're all kind of in it.
Yes, exactly. Which to me is much more satisfying than the early stories I would do, which would be about, look at those people over there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So, I remember my friend Emmy. The other moment for me was my friend Emmy the Great, who's a singer-songwriter. At the very beginning of this process, we were talking about sort of pirated content, and she was saying, we've all lost so much of ways that we can make money. And I said, well, because one way that porn people make up their loss of income is through escorting. So I said to her, well, at least you don't have to have sex with your fans. And she was like, well, not yet. So I remember, that conversation stayed in my head as well, because Emmy was being really funny about it. And so those were all the starting points. And then we had this amazing breakthrough on the set of Stepdaughter Cheerleader Orgy.
Which is such a catchy title.
Yeah. I know. Where so many things happened on that set. That was one of those days where my life changed on the set of Stepdaughter Cheerleader Orgy. But one of them was because of the title. So in the old days, porn films were called things like The Billionaire's Blonde. And these
sounds
days,
like Mills and Boone.
Right, yeah. And these days they're called Stepdaughter Cheerleader Orgy, and it's because of search engine optimization. That's they have to work out what the most searched terms are and then make films that abide by those terms. So that was a big revelation to me. And then I remember saying to the director, Mike Quasar, so are there any porn people who just aren't searchable, who fall through the net, who you can't employ because they're just not keyword searchable? And he said, yes, if you're 25 years old in the Valley now, doesn't matter how good looking you are, it doesn't matter anything. It's very, very hard for you to get work because you're too old to be a teen and you're too young to be a MILF.
Yeah.
So it's the fallow years between teen and MILF. And so that was...
At least you got the MILF years to look forward to.
Well, exactly. I said, at what age did they become a MILF and become employable again?
Yeah.
And I said, at 30.
Oh, that's depressing.
Yeah. Well, he said, unless they've actually had 4 kids. He said, in which case, probably 29. So that became a huge... the way... That was massively revelatory to me.
And is it that kind of gap? Are they the people that are going into escorting? And
and also customs, which is, camming.
Yes, bespoke porn.
Yeah, bespoke porn, where you'll make an entire porn film for one viewer. So all of that was super interesting to me. But what was really interesting to me was, going back to that credit card thing, actually, it's really similar, that you've got these rather boring tech people who are very good at A/B testing or search engine optimization or so on, but what they're doing is infecting, it's mutating the world's culture. And so they're up in Montreal or wherever doing that, and in the Valley you've got a 25-year-old woman who has to go into escorting because she's not a teen and she's not a MILF. And those connections between decisions made on high and the impact that it's having in the real world is endlessly interesting.
And are the tech... do the tech guys actually give a shit about that much?
No, because they've got cognitive dissonance. They psychologically trick themselves into not giving a shit, like we all do.
Yeah.
They're not sort of maybe not aware of the consequences of what they're doing.
Yeah, they don't go to porn sets.
No.
They stay up in Montreal. There's a huge disconnect between their lives and the lives of the people who are providing the content, which is then being pirated and shoved on their site.
The SEO thing is everywhere, isn't it? Because now articles online, people will pack SEO into the URLs to get it seen, and YouTube. I do some YouTube videos and stuff, and all I'm thinking about is who can I make a video about that's going to have a strong SEO name for the title. It really influences, and it's not just porn; it's everywhere.
Yeah, and as creative people, really we should be
we should be amazing.
We should be leading, not following. And if you abide by, the SEO thing, then automatically it means you're following trends and not creating, not leading, not creating new insights.
Yeah. But that's a very brave and bold thing to do, to break out of the pack.
I think you have to do it. I think it's unsatisfying to do anything else.
Yeah.
Saying that, I don't want to give anything away too much, but I'm doing a story at the moment which... It's very hard for me to say this without giving anything away.
Yeah.
So you know what, I won't.
Okay,
that's fair enough.
Why
risk it?
It'll be out pretty soon.
Yeah.
But basically, I'm doing a story at the moment which is similar thematically to stuff that people are already thinking and talking about.
Okay.
But that's okay for me because it's mystery.
Yeah.
And when you enter into a mystery and follow wherever it goes, you don't know where it's going to end.
Yeah.
So if it does end up in a place that's actually quite similar to a lot of the stuff that's in the conversation at the moment, I think that's fine.
Yeah.
But that's really oblique, and I'm sorry to...
No.
It will pique people's interest,
Exactly.
hopefully, so I get them looking out for it.
Yeah.
How can we sort of SEO get that really trending?
How can we SEO this podcast? That's what we need to think about, really.
Yeah.
Is there anything out of all the work you've done that you're sort of proudest of? You look back and think, I really sort of nailed that, and I'm so proud of it.
I'd say the tone of the Psychopath Test. I love the fact that it's it's a book about really serious things, but it's got that kind of Joseph Heller, Kurt Vonnegut sort of absurdist
cautionary tale as well.
Yeah, but then the tone, the way it's written, is absurd and funny and silly. So, but without ever detracting from the seriousness. So I love the fact that I managed to create that tone for that book. I think the Justine Sacco story, actually, and So You've Been Publicly Shamed, I'm really proud of, because I think I was identifying something that nobody else had noticed.
It's very emotional as well.
Yeah.
I mean, seeing someone, reading about someone so traumatized by something that could happen to all of us, as we've explained, is just, it's quite harrowing.
Yeah, absolutely. And the fact that nobody knew it was bad. Until my book came along, nobody knew that what happened to Justine Sacco was bad. Nobody, didn't cross anyone's mind.
They thought, she'll be all right.
She'll be fine. Either she deserved it. She's the daughter of a billionaire, which, by the way, she isn't.
Yeah.
Her dad sells carpets. But that's what people would say about it. Well, she's a billionaire's daughter.
Yeah.
Complete lie.
To justify it.
Yeah, it's cognitive dissonance.
You probably could make millions selling carpets, though, couldn't you? Maybe if you sold a lot of carpets.
Yeah. Well, I clarified. She's not a billionaire. Those two stories I'm really proud of. It's easier for me to say the things that I'm not proud of. I mean, I feel pretty proud of most of my work.
That's great.
There's a couple of things in The Men Who Stare at Goats I'm less proud of. I think I made a couple of creative decisions in that book.
So was that a harder book to write generally?
It was the only book I've ever written under pressure.
Right.
There was a lot. Them had been a big success, and there was a lot of pressure on me to follow it up, both from Channel 4 over here and also from my publishers.
Because you did some documentary with David Icke, didn't you? It was off the back of them.
Yeah, exactly. So I made a couple of decisions. I think the problem with The Men Who Stare at Goats was I decided to be credulous. I made this sort of creative decision that I would like dive into this may be true, this may not be true, and sort of enjoy the ambiguity, as opposed to what I would do now, which is be absolutely very clearly sort of a critical thinker and an investigative journalist to try and work out exactly what is true, what's not true. When you read The Men Who Stare at Goats now, there's less of an interest in trying to work out what the truth is.
Yeah.
So in a way, it feels more like a sort of like a fairy tale sort of maze. But so I wouldn't have written it that way. But honestly, there's not much else that I'm not. And there's even chapters in that book that I'm really proud of too. So,
but you're clearly someone that learns from your past mistakes.
Yeah,
you've mentioned quite a few already today, and like clearly you recognise them. Yeah, and I guess you must have in past work after that learned from it and changed the way you do things.
Yeah, and definitely become more humanist, more empathetic. Yeah, not that I don't think I was ever a sort of authoritarian writer. Like I would never like go into some place full of eccentrics to say, look at how ridiculous these eccentrics are, look at how fabulously normal I am and consequently a representative of the way the world should work, which is what some journalists in my position, do. Yeah. I've never done that, but I do it even less now.
Yeah. Okay, so at the end of the podcast, we've decided we like to ask people what advice you would pass on, because we're hoping they're going to be creative people listening to this podcast who have blank moments in the theme of the pod. Is there anything you would pass on in terms of dealing with those kind of moments?
Well, space is a good thing, and you're definitely your own best editor, or I certainly see that to be true about myself, that I go back to something with a fresh eye. So moving away from something and then going back to it helps hugely. Solves most.
For any particular amount of time, or does it not matter?
Well, for me, it's just overnight, to be honest.
Oh, wow, okay.
Yeah, I go back to something the next morning and I can see its faults. And then over and over and over again until you go back to it the next morning and there's nothing you want to change, and that's when you know it's done.
Yeah.
That's one of my big kind of things I've learnt about how to write. So that's something. When you're really... It's... I think I do have something. Did you have a preconception of what the story would be?
Yeah.
And is your problem that the story isn't fulfilling what your preconception was? And if so, then get rid of that preconception and start, think of yourself as like a river. When there's a rock in the river doesn't stop. The river goes around the rock.
Yeah.
So I've really learned that. And in fact, when your preconception is undermined and you start to realise your story is something completely different, you hit a wall because you're not getting what you wanted to get. But then you suddenly realise, oh my God, if I go in that direction, forget about that preconception, I'll take the story over this way, then often the story gets better.
Yeah.
And I think audiences, readers really like that. Oh my God, I thought the story was going to be one thing, but now it's shifted into something else. And I'm following the writer's thought process, in the way that you follow a river going around a rock.
Yeah, they're following that journey with you as you... The twist in the story is your twist because it's happening to you.
Absolutely. So if you suddenly get blocked, maybe that's part of your story. Why are you blocked?
But it's hard to let go of preconceptions because we're proud animals, aren't we? And we have these preconceptions, and because we think we're right or whatever. Yeah. It's really hard to let them go.
A lot of that, I think, has got to do with the very British. Now I live in America. I think I can say this very British style of journalism and things, shows like Have I Got News for You and things like Question Time and Radio 4. It's so oppositional. It's all about people being oppositional and everyone having to defend their position, and it's bullshit. It's really bullshit. And this oppositional, haughty bullshit that infects so much of British culture doesn't exist outside of Britain. Most countries have found other really interesting ways of telling stories and doing this stuff, So actually, part of the reason why I think, with what you just said about being proud and so on, is because we're growing up in this world where, on Radio 4, you have to sternly defend your position, and then they'll bring somebody on who will attack your position, which means you have to double down even more. And it's bullshit. Yeah. It's fake. It's fake. It's oppositional nonsense.
We have to let that go.
I'm not saying let it go completely, but I would say the problem with British culture is it relies too much on that.
Mm-hmm.
So there are there are like American news shows on MSNBC or CNN or whatever, which follow that format, but it's not the only thing.
Yeah.
There's all sorts of different ways of telling stories.
Yeah.
And so I think there's too much reliance on that in British culture.
Yeah.
And I actually think people are beginning to get a bit sick of it. I mean, people don't watch Have I Got News For You anymore, nowhere near in the numbers that they used to. And I think people are getting a bit tired of that constant, fake antagonism that you get on Radio 4 and Question Time. And
Okay, Charles, what's your retort to that?
I'm rubbish at retorts.
right.
No, I agree. I agree. I totally
Yeah.
agree with you because I think people are getting bored of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and actually, the fact that long form podcasts like this are have gained some popularity shows that people are getting bored with that other
Yeah,
type of
absolutely.
thing.
Yeah.
They want to hear a different form of podcast.
Yeah.
Like this one, which we hope will be very successful. But John, thank you so much for
Yeah,
giving us
thank
your
you,
time
John.
and chatting
Yeah.
us. We really, really appreciate it.
That's my pleasure. And it was really nice to talk to you guys.
Yeah,
Well, lovely, thank you. And best of luck with the next project as well. We hope
Yeah.
it
Thank
goes
you.
well.
Well, I'm doing this Audible show, and I'm doing this screenplay, and I really like them both, and I think they'll both be done within 8 weeks.
Because the screenwriting is something you've started doing more in more recent years.
Yeah, just because it's being offered to me.
Yeah.
Like it's not. I don't have a great ambition to do it, and it doesn't come as easy to me as non-fiction. But if you get like Bong Joon-ho saying to you, "Do you want to co-write?"
Oh man, I mean, Notcha was great. I really loved it, and
thank you. You can't turn something like that down. And actually, the screenplay I'm writing at the moment really is playing to my strengths, actually, because it's more journalistic than entirely fictional. So I'm really enjoying it.
Fantastic.
Well, thank you very much, Jon
Good
Ronson.
stuff.
Thanks, you guys.
I think looking back, I should probably apologise to Kirsty Allsop. Yeah, I was a little bit mean about her in that one.
Yeah, but it was said with love.
It was, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know about love, but it was said with something.
Well, Kirsty, if you're listening, then we'd love you to come on the podcast.
Well, yeah, exactly, and you can defend yourself.
It's suddenly become a very different podcast. Well, that was what a great
Also, what a horribly, badly, unheartfelt apology.
apology. Yeah.
No, I am sincerely sorry if I upset any Kirsty Allsops out there.
Yeah. What a great episode. What a
Fantastic
great first episode with Jon Ronson. Like, what a lovely guy. Really interesting. Some great advice.
Yeah, and so, really candid and fascinating stuff about all aspects of his work.
Yeah, I found the bit when he's talking about working on more than one project at once as a way of dealing with blank moments. It's like, man, I could never do that. I can barely do one, but that's really interesting.
Yeah, no, likewise. I've struggled to do one project at a time, not alone more. But what a great idea, though, to try different things and actually take your mind off it and actually challenge yourself with the harder things first and then do something as a treat afterwards.
Yeah. And isn't it great that he didn't pick up on our blank moments? Just
He
rolled on with it.
He picked up on mine and quite rightly corrected me on the title of his
He didn't
book.
let that stop the pod. He just
No, he was
like the
very,
absolute
very
professional he is.
gracious. Very, very gracious. And I
Absolutely.
thank you for that, John.
Thank you so much to Jon Ronson for joining us on the First Blank podcast. We hope that you enjoyed that. If you did, please get in contact with us. We're on all the socials. We're on the Instagram, the Twitter, and
Twitter.
the
Why isn't
Facebook.
this
I
there?
don't know. I'm just an old man.
I mean, they're all at Blank Pod.
Correct, yeah. So please let us know if you enjoyed the pod. Give us some feedback. We'd love to hear it. We want to know about your blank moments. If there's anyone listening that has blank moments, feel free to tell us.
We'd love to hear your blank moments.
If that takes longer than 140 characters, then you can...
Well, there's 280 now.
Oh, yeah, man, I'm so behind. Anyway, if it's longer than 280, you can email us, which is hello@theblankpodcast.com, and let us know if there's anyone that you want to hear from in the future.
Yeah, we'd love to hear any suggestions for guests. We've got some fantastic guests coming up, but we are always open to trying to find other guests to come on.
Also, please rate us on iTunes or wherever you're listening to this podcast on, so we can convince some more celebs to come on in the future.
Yeah, and please subscribe.
And subscribe.
Yeah.
Do all the things.
Do all the things that we'd love you to do.
And obviously, John alluded there to a new project that he's working on. That's almost in perfect timing, has been announced.
Yes,
Actually.
yeah, the trailer's out now. It's called The Last Days of August. It sounds fantastic. Do check it out on. It's a project by Audible, so yeah, check it out on all the usual podcast places. But it's going to be every bit as brilliant as The Butterfly Effect.
Fantastic. Well, that's it. That's the end of the very first Blank podcast. How you
Hope
feeling?
you've enjoyed
How you
it.
feeling, Giles?
Really good, really excited. Can't wait for episode 2.
Neither can I. It'll be with you next Wednesday, so look out for that. In the meantime, have fun.
Thank you.
I don't know how to sign off.
That's terrible.